This is the Black Pearl Chronicle. It says one of the oldest surviving ship's logs in the world, and it might just be cursed. Let me explain. Hi everyone, this is the Black Pearl Chronicle, and if you can believe it, this little book was written 300 years ago. Back then, the world was a very different place. There were no phones or TVs, and life was pretty tough if you weren't the king or queen. In fact, if you were born poor, you probably wouldn't live past 40. But if you did somehow manage to live that long, you would have seen some pretty amazing things. You would have seen a balding epidemic, the invention of the smallpox vaccine, and a whole bunch of pirates getting off your ship. See, this book was written between 1706 and 1717 aboard a British ship called the Pearl. Now, I know what you're thinking. Ew, a pirate ship. Well, not quite. The Pearl was actually a warship built for the Royal Navy by the same people who built the Mayflower, and its job was to sail around the Caribbean and capture other ships, specifically Spanish galleons filled with treasure. And boy, did they ever find those ships. Between 1706 and 1717, the Pearl made 13 voyages to the Caribbean and captured over 200 Spanish ships filled with riches beyond the wildest imaginations of the time. I mean, we're talking about enough gold to make every man on the ship a millionaire today. And after each voyage, an officer named William Dampier wrote down everything that happened in this book. He wrote about the weather, the treasure they found, and even the scurvy they all got. Scurvy is a horrible disease caused by a vitamin C deficiency, and it killed many sailors during long voyages. So if you want to avoid getting scurvy, don't forget your fruits and veggies. But sadly, while the book gives us an incredible first-hand look at life aboard a warship 300 years ago, it also gives us a glimpse into something much more sinister. See, before each voyage, the officers of the ship would write down a list of rules that everyone had to follow. They included things like take no servant from the ship without leave and do your best to prevent the spreading of infectious diseases. But the most interesting one was the one they added after their first voyage to the Caribbean. It read, "No man to touch a Spaniard's treasure or money until it is examined by the officers, upon pain of death." Apparently, they had already had a few problems with people stealing treasure, but they didn't just add this rule for the crew. They also took out full newspaper ads warning any would-be treasure thieves that the ship was under a curse. Now, up until this point, the story of the Black Pearl is pretty similar to many others from that time period. There are tons of books about treasure ships and privateers in the Caribbean, but here's where things get strange. After one of the voyages, the crew of the Pearl brought back a chest full of emeralds, and when they opened it up, they found that almost all of the emeralds were cursed. Wait, what? Yep, that's right. The emeralds were cursed. And if you want proof, all you have to do is look at the history of the emerald trade. Emeralds are rare gemstones that have been coveted by kings and queens for centuries, but they've always been associated with bad luck. That's why Colombian emeralds come with a warning label. So when the crew of the Pearl realized that their new treasure was cursed, they did the only logical thing they could think of. They threw it all back into the ocean and sailed away. Now, you may be thinking that this is where the story ends, but it doesn't. See, soon after the Black Pearl set sail for England, a terrible storm struck, killing 3 crew members and injuring many others. And that wasn't the only tragedy that struck the ship. Soon after, several crew members died of yellow fever, which is a horrible disease spread by mosquitoes, and as if that wasn't enough, the ship ran into a hurricane so powerful that it broke the mast. Now, this is where things get really weird. The crew was stranded at sea for weeks with no way to repair the ship. But then, out of nowhere, another ship appeared. It was a Spanish ship, and it offered to take the crew off the Pearl and bring them back to England. But there was one catch. The Spanish ship was carrying emeralds, and the crew of the Pearl had no choice but to take some of the emeralds off their hands. And guess what? The moment they touched the emeralds, they were cursed. A plague swept through the ship, killing 60 men. Now, this story could have ended right there, but it didn't. The curse followed the emeralds to England, where several nobles who took the emeralds home died horrible deaths. Some fell to their deaths, while others were killed in duels. Even the Bishop of London, who tried to bless the emeralds, was struck blind. Now, I don't know about you, but that sounds like a curse to me. So what happened to the emeralds? Well, they were eventually given to Queen Anne, who wore them in her crown. And legend has it that she never took them off until her death. And as for the book, well, it survived for another 300 years until it was discovered in a library in Jamaica. It was then donated to the British Library, where it is kept today. Now, I don't know what I believe, but one thing's for sure, this book is definitely cursed. I mean, just look at all the tragedies that have befallen those who have touched the emeralds. If that doesn't scream curse, I don't know what does.